like with this issue, because it's such a big issue, well, specifically right now, and it's such a, like, it is such a rare issue, like not that many people have actually met many trans people. So it can kind of feel bigger than it actually is, like in terms of, you know, I bumped into Abigail on Joe Rogan, and kind of came into the debate that way. But up until that point, I hadn't really even thought about this sort of stuff for the better part of a decade. Like it just becomes your normal reality, the way you live your life. Like, you know, I'm kind of a workaholic, so I spend most of my time at work. So, or I have been up until the last couple of years. So it kind of really does just live in the background. And then, and people kind of that haven't met many trans people or any trans people think that it's going to be this big deal, and you know, you're going to be presented with a list of demand when you meet them, and they're like, you know, I normally interact with people for a while, and then when it kind of starts to get to the point where we're friends, I will tell them, like, so anywhere between 3 to 6 months of, you know, when I'm working with people, if it makes sense, you know, everybody will find out at some point, so that it's kind of, because they just don't make as much sense without that piece of information. So yeah, but the way it can feel when you're seeing it only through the media can be quite different. It can be discombobulating in some ways.
I think that's because it's been weaponized. And look, you know, for what it's worth, my point of view is, whoever people, if they just want to live their lives and just be left the heck alone.
Yeah.
But see, that because it's been weaponized, what's happening is it's the issue is, as I think Jordan Peterson has nailed, the imposition of reality.
Yeah.
It's like, you will accept this reality, and you will, like, I have created this reality for myself and it works for me, and you'll accept it. And that's like, that's kind of,
yeah, that's when, you know, it really doesn't matter, like, it really doesn't matter what the subject matter is. As soon as you start stepping over into other people's space, they're going to have a problem. Like, like, it's not a trans thing, it's just a general person thing. Like, I've found this over the last couple of decades. Like, even if people aren't on board, or they don't like it, or they disagree, or whatever, so long as you don't encroach on their space, they're perfectly fine. Like, it's not, you know, so long as they are free to think what they think, they are happy to be polite. They're happy to, you know, be friends, blah, 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 blah. It just is this whole, and this subject matter is kind of perfect SJW kind of fodder. And I kind of think that that has been a trap in some ways as well, like alternative lifestyle, like kind of stuff, gay stuff, queer stuff, like it just is part of that realm. So it's perfectly suited to, oh, we're going to fight for these people's rights. But if you look, they, you know, like, I don't know that I didn't have any rights already. It's quite weird.
kind of like, that's a really good segue actually, because I know you don't consider yourselves a men's rights activist, but from our exchanges, I also know that you've got a deep sympathy with some of the ideas that, you know.
Still funny to me that that's the case.
Yeah, I know.
Unlikely.
Well, first I'll get you to explain that, and then, like, I've got another question for you that was actually kind of a really full-on feminist friend of mine has made an observation about the men's rights activists and trans groups, and we'll get to that. But
wow.
I really want you to.
All the men's rights activists that I've seen talk about trans stuff talk about Caitlyn Jenner as it, so that would be interesting. So I was a lesbian before I transitioned. I grew up in a single mother household. My brother left home very early, so, and I come from, my mother's family is basically all strong, intelligent, independent, take no shit kind of women. and then I went to, for the first 2 years of high school, I went to a girls' school. So by the time I then went to a co-ed school in year 9, puberty had set in and boys had their own shit that they were worrying about, which I now can comprehend and have some sympathy for. But at the time it was like, you're a jerk, I want absolutely nothing to do with you. So, and then you graduate from high school, come out as a lesbian, and I didn't even interact with gay boys, like whatsoever. And you kind of, even though I grew up in a time where they're handing out stickers in year 7 and 8 saying girls can do anything, you know, they had this really successful campaign where, you know, like it just didn't occur to us that women were oppressed, or like, you know, like we scoffed at these stickers like girls can do anything as if it was even a question. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is ridiculous and embarrassing. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course girls can do anything they want, they're just as good as boys, blah 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 blah. My generation just implicitly believed that statement. It wasn't even questioned. Anyone that I grew up around, like my sister's generation, same thing. So I get to my early to mid 20s, and you kind of at the same time absorb this feminist rhetoric, especially in the absence of no, you know, no male figures really. Like, they were all kind of, you know, in and out and floaty, and I didn't really engage with any guys at all. So I kind of imbibed in this whole feminist men are rapists, like I used to call them, like I would call you a boy deliberately, disrespectfully, had just no concept whatsoever. Men were rapists, they were murderers, they were bashers, um, blah, 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 blah. Like the whole bit, I just instinctively believed it, at the same time thinking girl power. How that worked, how that was in any way cohesive, I don't know, but that was kind of where I was at, and came into the lesbian community, and you start interacting with kind of separatist feminist, radical feminist, like more extreme kind of rhetoric. And if you kind of close one eye and squint and tilt your head and only look at half the problem, then it makes a lot of sense. Like, that stuff is very convincing in the absence of, you know, the other half of the argument. You could just, you know, absolutely believe it, and I know hundreds of people that do. um, and then I decided to transition. I started taking testosterone, and there's this weird thing that happens frequently with lesbians who start transitioning. At first, you're joining the oppressor class. You're becoming one of those assholes. So you do everything in your power to resist. You're not really going to be a guy. You're gender queer. You're demi. Like, they're doing this demi thing now, which I don't even know what that means. But there's this, you know, like there's this reality meet, you know, theology meets reality kind of impending doom thing that you have to calculate if you're going to transition, and you're going to take even a half dose takes longer to transition, but you're going to get to the point where you kind of look like this. So it doesn't really matter what you do, you are going to have to line those, you know, you're going to have to tie that lace. um and you don't ever, it's not like, you know, you inject testosterone and day one it happens slowly over a few months. And it's even after a few months, it's not like you wake up and an alarm clock goes off and says today is the day that people are going to start seeing you as a guy. It just slowly happens, and you're kind of aware that it's going to happen because your body's changing, and you know, all of this other stuff is happening, and it's exciting and terrifying, and you know, like there's all of this stuff happening. um and then you start passing as a guy, and you're like, the reality of, you know, I kind of was like, I always thought that I was going to stay in my little queer lesbian alternate kind of bubble. I always thought that I kind of knew that, no, I kind of always thought that I would have the same friends, that I would move in similar kind of metrosexual circles, blah, 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 blah.
It was your tribe.
Men are mainly feminist and they believe that.
Yeah.
But that didn't end up being the case. So you end up meeting guys and they're lovely and they're welcoming, they're friendly. They, you start to see that they actually really give a shit about each other, that there are rituals within male circles, that they care about each other, that they look after each other. Like you start, and this happened literally over a 15-year period. So you kind of start realizing that the assumptions that you came in with, thinking that men are just basically hairless apes that drag their knuckles on the ground, you kind of start realizing pretty quickly, maybe not. Maybe it's just these guys. And then you meet a few more guys and, like it's just this reinforcing thing where it's like, men are not what the mainstream kind of narrative about men is at all. Like it's kind of almost like society doesn't understand masculinity at all. It's really weird. Like I transitioned and I thought I'll stay in my queer little trans man bubble. And the opposite, like I am free range out in heterosexual mainstream cis society. And I saw you, I think I've seen you do this twice where you were talking to someone and you were like, men have women have a very civilizing effect on men.
It's true.
And it is true. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like you stand up straighter, you give your mates a little less shit, you might swear slightly less.
Yeah.
From a radical perspective, like a radical feminist perspective, like if I had heard that in my early 20s, my assumption would have been less rapey jokes, less bitch talk. Like I haven't heard any of that. Like when I came in, that's what I was like, that's what I secretly expected to find. I expected men to be overwhelmingly racist, misogynistic assholes that hated women. And I haven't seen, like, it's not that I haven't seen any, like, not one guy, not one in 22 years almost, like, not one has been that way. So it's like this narrative of, like men are this and they are sweet, warm, caring, lovely, like not really that tough at all, only if they absolutely have to be. Like, of course, there are good guys that do shitty things and, like there are sociopaths and psychopaths. But they're the minority. Like, if you believe the narratives and the feminist perspectives, you would think that they're the majority. Like, it just is.
It's just not true.
It's like Whiplash, really. It's like you come in thinking one thing, go on this long journey, get halfway through and realize, hold on a minute, I'm actually seeing I'm seeing the opposite of what I expected to see. Like what I thought is not reality at all. And yet there are still people outside talking about men like just rape.
Yeah.
Constantly on the
mind. Yeah, like I wake up in the morning and I want to rape someone, and it's like the it's like the
like
thing.
You see guys. Yeah, it's so not based in reality that it just is ridiculous. Like it's hard to take seriously sometimes. And then like with a lot of this gender critical feminist stuff, they're talking about, protecting women and then they kind of do this byline. They'll go on for about half an hour with that. And then they do this little tail, not all men. Like, well, if it's not all men, why, you know what I mean? Like there's just this disproportionate focus on something that does happen, but is not, like.
It's not indicative. It's
not at all.
It's not indicative. It's not who we are. It's one of the actually, and Bettina got so angry with me. That was a fantastic interview, man. She owned me, like on a couple of times. But
I kind of like that bit though, to be honest.
But it's kind of like I had so many school moms like that, and I was like, no, Matthew. It's like, ah! It bought.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things because you kind of have to go, no, you're full of shit. But at the same time, you know that if you say that as a guy to someone who's like, to some woman that's coming at you going, statistics, blah, 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 you know that if you go, no, I'm sorry, you're just going to cop it. Like, absolutely, you are wrong no matter what you do. So you kind of try to hedge and, you know, like, we kind of need to start having these conversations and going, listen, I'm sorry, but that's just not true.
Yeah.
And have the actual information to go, this is why it's not true.
Yeah.
But you can't, you know, like, at the same time, you want to be nice and you want to be understanding and you want to, you know, like, kind of go with the feminist rhetoric and say, yes, this does exist, so that you're not seen as like there's just this discombobulating, you know, crash that is impending that you can't really do as a guy. So you're trying to be, you know, like, hedge bets and kind of be nice. And Bettina's just like,
and we met. It was so cool. And we met. Man, I love her. And we meant different things. Like, what I meant when I kind of said that is like pretty much the way you articulated it. It's like, you know, we can be kind of gross, boys. Like, you know, we fart a lot, we pick our noses and rub on each other every.
When you say that, that's not what they understand you mean.
Like, you know, we do
at all.
We do dumb stuff, and like, you know, you might shake your beer up and squirt it in your friend's face while he's not looking. And you won't do that when there are women around. Like, you just won't. Like, you know, and you won't.
But when you say to a woman, "Oh, you know, women have a civilizing effect," what they hear is not what you mean at all. Like,
I'm starting to realize that I still don't really get it. Like, to be honest, I still don't get it, because, you know, what I'm thinking is, because I'm kind of thinking chivalry in a certain kind of like, in a certain sense. But you see this manifested, like, going back to the other thing as well. I know a lot of people who genuinely, no kidding, think that the Queensland Police and other like police organisations here in Australia, like, the cops get up in the morning, or, you know, if they're on night shift at night,
just looking to kill black people. I'm
looking forward to a day of oppressing some people with melanin in their skin. They, no kidding, and like large amounts of society now honestly think that's true. That's the way it is, and we have to address this issue. I'm like, have you ever dealt with a police officer? Like, once? Like, I mean, besides that time you got that ticket that you deserved and you whined about it driving away, but like, you know, do you know any coppers? Like, and don't get me wrong, like, you know, I know a lot of coppers actually, and yeah, you'll hear some kind of ribald comments, like sitting around there in day rooms when they, especially, you know, if they're drinking beers and stuff afterwards, and, you know, you'll hear some terms that probably aren't politically correct. Like, there's kind of, well,
I work in a factory just this side of Blacktown, which is like full on bogan. I don't know how well you know Sydney, but it is full on bogan, blue collar. Like, Mount Druitt is right next door. Like, there are documentaries made about Mount Druitt. Like, it's a rough place. So these people that work in this factory have you know, like, lower working class people, like missing teeth type people. And these guys are not, they're not sexist. Like, the women that they work with, they really admire. There's like a, you know, like, people will go running to Tiff going, oh, Tiff, this happened to me, or what do you think of this, or I've got this problem, or, you know, like, they actually, like, they really, like, she's one of the guys, like, with all of them, there's like half men, half women, basically, more or less. And these are the people, this is the demographic that are meant to be, you know, like, just unspeakably sexist, and they're not at all.
So I was at this meeting where these group of people were getting into this copper, and it was in a DV kind of forum. It's like, the police don't care about DV, blah, 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 blah. Police don't care about women, and this copper was kind of taking it, going, yeah. You can tell I hate women by the fact that I took an oath to serve Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I'm a female. I'm married with kids, and the last time I got injured at work was like defending was it a DV? I got my teeth knocked out, or punched in the face, or no, whatever it was, the injury was. I don't recall. It's like, Yeah, you can tell. But there was just no, like, because it was a DV forum with these particularly nasty femo-Nazis. But like I said, it's really funny. They're actually, these people are parodies of each other. They really are. It's like the left wing and the right wing, like, you know, and when I say left wing and right wing, again, for complete clarity, what I mean is like, so Nazis and communists. So, and again, because the only difference really between those two groups is the qualifying adjective they put in front of the word socialist. Like, no, I'm not a national socialist. I'm an international socialist.
Yeah.
So I oppress a different group of people for different reasons. It's like,
you know, like
somehow that matters. But look, going back to, because I really want to ask this question, because one of this feminist friend of mine, she's absolutely wonderful, Edie White. She was one of my interviews. And she was so angry with the patina thing. And she goes,
but she tried to take a chunk out of me as well.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, in the comments, it's like, whatever.
She's actually a really nice lady. Like,
I have no doubt.
She's wonderful and smart as a whip.
Yeah.
Smart as a whip. But she said, Matt, like, what you don't understand is men's rights activists are the same as trans activists. And I'm like, you know, is that true? Like, you know, in talking about and just considering the kind of like, you know, the parody of each other thing that we've seen there, like, is there a degree of truth to that, Kev? What do you think?
Well, in her mind, absolutely. And I can see how she can string that bow. However, men's rights activists are men that are sick of being told that they're oppressors after they have been just completely done over in the family court and ripped off, and, you know, have access to their kids denied when that's, you know, like, there's this idea that you as a father don't get most of, like, when you get to the end of your life, I think the thing that you'll look back on with the most joy and the most pride is your family. Like, of course, that's a no-brainer. But there's this weird thing that men don't love their children or don't want it, like they're just constantly looking for ways to get out of, you know, taking responsibility for their kids and blah, 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 blah. So here's this group of people that are just sick to the teeth of being told that they're oppressors when they're fucking truck drivers. Like, there may be white men that are in charge of the world. There's probably 5 of them and they oppress everybody else. But I mean, the idea, like, it's just a ridiculous concept at this in this day and age that, you know, that is in any way reality. And then when you start looking into, like, I just found the Red Pill movie 2 weeks ago. I'm kind of late to everything.
I haven't seen it.
Which is this feminist filmmaker who had done like gay parenting kind of, you know, or gay rights kind of documentaries, abortion documentaries, like hardcore feminist type person, young, you know, blonde woman who had been an actor that decided she'd been sexually harassed enough in Hollywood, so she, you know, took up the camera and became a documentarian. And then she was looking for a new project, and she happened across Paul Elam and his Men's Rights, A Voice for Men website. And she kind of, the premise, she doesn't say this, she's much more polite in the interviews, but you can kind of see she was like, right, she bumped into this website, was shocked by what she saw, these guys being provocative, trying to start a conversation, going, listen, like, this is a complex social situation where, you know, like, there's a complex system of benefits and minuses to being a man, and the same to being a woman. Like, the two complement each other. Let's not be at war. Anyway, so you can kind of see that she came across this site and was like, I'm gonna do a documentary exposing these wankers, like, you know, blah 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 blah. Like, she you can see that she would have come in going, I'm gonna eat these guys for breakfast. Yeah. Basically, she did 100 hours, took like a year or 2 to make this documentary, and by the end of it, she was like, holy shit, these guys actually have a point.
They got a point. Yeah. Kind of
shit. And she no longer calls herself a feminist. And there were screenings in Sydney. Like, she took this movie around the world. feminists actually protested in Sydney, in Melbourne, in I don't know if they did in Brisbane. She was on the project. They tried to just pummel her on that TV show. Like they tried everything they could to stop this thing from being screened, you know, blah, 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 blah. So no, I don't agree with her. Like, so.
But you did say that you could see how that bow could be strung. Can we discuss that?
Well, because she sees, well, let me finish and then we'll come back.
Okay.
So women's studies was implemented in the late 60s, early 70s as a academic form of study, which I'm sure you've spoken to Janice Fiamengo about. And there was a lot of pressure for them to do it, and they did it on the ASAP. And it was possibly not as well considered as they didn't set it up as well as they possibly could have. Like, there's no biology, there's no science. Like, you know, like when they implemented this stuff, they didn't, you know, sit down and nut it out where they wanted to go with it. They just set it up and tried to figure it out on the way as they were running. So they've made several mistakes. And then that over time became gender studies because we need to be more PC. And like all of this queer theory, gender ideology nonsense that is kicking around at the moment came from, in large part, Judith Butler, who is a world-renowned radical feminist. Like, there's a straight line, and there are a whole heap of gender critical, not radical feminists that will say this came from us. But there is a line of thought where it's like sex is immutable, so any trans woman is naturally a man, they behave like men, they are advocating for the rights of men to enter women's spaces, be seen as women, blah, 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 blah. So they are then men's rights activists. So she sees them as men's rights activists, and she hasn't dug too far into men's rights activism apart from to judge it. Like, if she gave it a fair, if she's a feminist who cares about equality, if feminism is about equality, then like by the time you get past, you know, Paul Elam being provocative for reasons that make sense when you dig into them, like he wrote this article about punching bitches or dragging bitches by the hair, because on a mainstream, you know, publication, there was a feminist writer that did a "Have you ever punched your boyfriend? We have, here's how" kind of article that got published in mainstream media, which is completely acceptable. And he's like Paul Elam at this point, frustrated to his back teeth, trying to be like, hey, look, there's, you know, like there are two standards here. So he wrote this article and everyone went nuts for good reason. But if you get past that stuff where they're being provocative to get attention, so that at least someone will dig a little bit further to actually see that they do have some valid concerns. So like, it's kind of, she is kind of right and she's kind of missing the point. And, you know, like if you want to gloss over it, then, you know, like, yeah, she kind of does have a point. But then, you know, like it's just, it's so convoluted and there are so many different things happening at one time, like because the trans umbrella has now, you know, like there's the transgender community, which are, you know, like people who do transition, don't transition, non-binary, there's transsexuals who fully transition, there's transsexuals who only partially transition, there's cross-dressers who have some kind of sexual fetish, there's trans people who have sexual fetishes, like there are several different groups that have been tagged under one umbrella. And these theories impact them differently in different ways. And some people go for them and other people don't. Like there are so many different things happening that it's just not, you know, like it's not a one sentence conversation as much as people want to make it. a one sentence conversation because not everybody's interested. It just isn't, you know, like trans rights activists that are the most rabid. Well, the other thing is that a lot of these are like university level feminist guys or feminist allies, or, you know, trans ally. Sorry, let me say that again. Lots of these guys are 20 something, you know, university students who are feminist allies, trying to be trans allies, trying to tell everybody else how to live, being hyperbolic online, telling people to go kill themselves, you know, and just throwing words around carelessly and saying, I hope you get raped and blah, 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 blah. Like, I've had a lot of this shit as well because I will speak out against gender ideology. I get told I'm a bootlicker, go kill myself, blah, 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 because I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's not trans. Like, no, that's not, you know, men are not, you know.
Go kill yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. It happens at regular intervals, and then I'll have, you know, like gender critical feminists, you know, telling me that I'm a woman LARPing as a man, and blah 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 blah. Like, you get it from both ends, like everybody does. There's this, you know, uncivilizing aspect that the internet brings because we haven't figured out a way to regulate it in a free speech equally. Like, it just is the wild wild west of people behaving badly. So a lot of these, you know, trans allies are not trans. They're behaving badly online. They're young men thinking that they're being moral for their social justice warrior beliefs, that, you know, anyone who doesn't agree that trans women are women is absolutely a bigot, even though trans women, like, it makes no sense. Like, it just is craziness online that, you know, unfortunately people have started taking seriously. It's
Wow.
it's a whole thing. Like,
Mate, on that note, Kev, you've been, like, it's kind of brave of what, you know, because, and you do see that word overused as stunning and brave, stunning and brave, stunning and brave. But, like, mate, it kind of, it's,
well, it's about fighting for, like, like my generation transitioned, and I kind of assumed that I would be joining the ranks of a very small, you know, cohort of, you know, like mannish kind of women who lived their lives as men. And, you know, like in the olden days, people would, you know, suddenly discover, oh, that's actually a woman, kind of, you know, like, I thought that I was the modern equivalent of that. Like, I didn't ever think I was becoming a man, or, you know, like, but because by the time you get to transition, you kind of have to make up your own mind about what you think about this. There is a lot of different individual approaches, and everybody thinks that their approach is right. But there definitely has been a generational shift where these theories that have come out of gender studies via Judith Butler and a handful of others have basically handed people their, you know, their deepest hope on a platter, and they, you know, then you are a woman or you are a man if you transition, which is not true. It's not reality, but it's what people want to hear the most. And they think that if they can convince everybody that this is true, that they'll be treated better. And it's like, I think you're coming at this ass backwards. Like, it's, you know, trans is okay. People are going to leave you alone. Like, you know, you let them do them and let you do you. And, you know, it's not that big a deal. Like, people don't really, you know, freak out that much. Like, so are you like, you strike me as someone that is deeply sympathetic to the men's rights stuff. Is that, where are you with that?
I don't consider myself a men's rights activist, although Edie has kind of like indicated, Chris, actually, her name, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris has kind of like indicated, like, so, you know, you're playing footsies with those guys. But
well, they have a point.
See, that's it. Like, I mean, my take on it is this: like, I saw some real injustices in the DV space. You know, I did, and I saw some, you know, stuff where.
Yeah, it's like my sister.
You just have to write, because the way the legislation and policy and procedure is written is, it's kind of like, basically it's like believe the woman. So I mean, if you're told something and could go either way, it could, like, You're getting people DV orders against them, and that just shouldn't happen. And you get, it's not good for the relationship. It breaks. It causes more trouble. And the person, it's normally the woman that kind of like regrets it later on, because they realise, I was just in a bad space that time. I was bitter. I was angry. Maybe he said something he shouldn't have, or maybe he slept with someone else, or maybe whatever it was that kind of happened. I was just angry, and I wanted to lash back and hurt him.
Yeah.
And you can.
The government gave me the tools to do it, so why wouldn't I?
Why wouldn't you? That's not what the justice. I know a lot about justice administration. I don't pretend to know a lot about justice, but I know a lot about its. I know a lot about its administration and the way the law works. And when stuff is counterproductive like that, like law really needs to work on the idea that laws are simple, easy, few, pretty much self-upholding and broadly accepted by society.
Yeah.
So when you after you've arrested the crook, or after they've been in the bin, even if like at the front they're walking out of court going, oh, this is unjust, there's going to be some part of some crook somewhere that knows, man, I'm kind of responsible for this. I did that. And in my 30-year career, like, I only met a couple of genuine sociopaths who never felt that. Almost everyone else did. Even organised criminals. Like, and I know quite a few organised, crook people who were and still are, incidentally, involved in organised crime, and have had conversations like this with them over beers. And kind of like some of them, like, it's really good because, like, now especially, it was good when I was in the police. It was kind of like, yeah, we're having a truce in the middle of no man's land. And now for me, because, like, I'm out of the job, it's like it's 1919, the war's over, and we're kind of like we're having beers and discussing what it was like. You were in the trenches, I was in the trenches. Man, what were the rats like for you? Oh, dude, like, so that's kind of what it's like. But I see all of these injustices, and they're real, and they're systematic, and they're being imposed by an oppressive system. And like you said, the men's rights activists have a point. I really don't like it when they're kind of like, when they get nasty, because I really do believe, as I said to Bettina, I don't know if she'd get angry with this, I really do believe that women have a civilizing influence on men, as with what I said before. I also believe that women have and deserve a special place in society. And when I say that, I mean basically around the rules of chivalry. So it's like, well,
they already kind of have that.
Like, and they should have always had that. It's like, there's a reason we put them in the lifeboats first.
Yeah.
And men should sacrifice. If push comes to shove, if it's in a circumstance like that and the boat is sinking, the man, and Bettina got so angry with me when I said this, but I stand by it. It's true. Men are expendable when push comes to shove.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no mistaking that, unless
that's our job.
Looking at it through, like a dogmatic lens. Like, that's kind of the thing. Like, I kind of, because I believed so much of it, it started to unravel shortly after I started transition. I started to realize, oh, this isn't really what I thought it was. Men are really lovely, and they're really like, they were so welcoming. Like, guys that knew I was transitioning, as I was transitioning, like,
welcome to the club.
Yeah, they were like, you're welcome, you're with us. Like, and they didn't.
You want a beer?
They didn't make a big deal out of it. I was just included. Like, it wasn't like a big song and dance kind of thing. It was just, welcome to the club kind of thing. This is how we do things over here. Like, and you kind of figure out how things work, and you realize the way that they view women, and it's like, holy shit, like, this is so different. Like, this is not, like, it's the opposite of what I thought. And then you start looking around and you're like, actually, if you want to get down to mass generalizations, like, Western society kind of was built by men for women. Like, there's no need to, like, some dude invented the iron and the washing machine, and, you know, like tampons and things like that. I still haven't read that book, but you know, like
that's our job. That is our job. That is what we are here to do. Like,
if you hated women, then why would you make their lives eat like, you know, like there's just this discombobulation of like, you know, like, and you like I see feminist spaces on Twitter every day where it's just so misandrous, like men this, men that, men are pigs, white cis males is like, and white cis males is really the only acceptable group societally that can, you know, be maligned openly in public repeatedly over and over and over and over and over again. Like there
and
is
it's
no
not right.
limit.
It's
There,
not
like,
right.
not
And the other thing about that is, and
equality, that's for sure.
and it links back to your it links back to what you were saying before. Well, so more accurately, links back to the question you kind of asked me. We there's no point to us doing all of this stuff if whatever you do is wrong and you're evil, stupid, and bad. If we're doing it for women and they all hate us and they're not going to validate us and they're not going to love us and they're not going to marry us and they're not going to have our kids,
You may as well go your own way.
like why, you know, why would you? Like the reason you fight wars against other marauding tribes who come to raise your altars and take your women is to protect your women and your.
Yeah.
But if there are no altars and the women don't want you, it's like they're that way.
Yeah.
Thailand.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Why would you do that?
It's kind of really remarkable on one level, and this is probably going to get us both in trouble, but that men have been thrown under the bus. Like I was in a space earlier today on Twitter, and there was a trans woman talking to a maybe 50 or 60-year-old dude who was who would come into a space to, you know, just to chat, to find out what was going on and talk politics a little bit. And she was it was a friendly conversation, and she started asking him hypotheticals, and through the process of these hypotheticals and his answers, it was clearly some part of some ethical course that she's just taken at university. She kind of implied that, you know, like it didn't really matter, like his kids are in there, like are grown up, but that it didn't really matter if he died, because his kids would be fine either way, that he was completely irrelevant to his child's life. And it's like, what?
That's not
like, I was the only person that was like, hey, hold it a minute here, like that's too far. Like, you
that's
know,
it. I mean, we are expendable, and I think that's what Bettina meant. Like, we are expendable. Like, if push comes to shove, it's like, okay, you guys are going on the lifeboats. I'm taking the 303 and the tin helmet, and I'm sorting stuff out. And like, I know this sounds like hyperbole, but like, I spent 30 years in the police. I know what it's like to actually risk your ass. Like, this is not hypothetical to me. I've had people try and kill me. I've pointed guns at people. I've hurt people. I've been hurt. Again, it's not like, what would I do in those circumstances? I do in those circumstances. I've done it. So yeah, I would. I would, like, okay, women and children in the Titanic, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to mourn my death. That my life was without meaning and point.
Yeah,
it's the sacrifice and the providing and being the provider that gives me meaning and point. Like, that's, you know, that's what I'm here to do. And God willing,
it's from my perspective, being on the outside looking in and kind of noticing this stuff, like, it kind of is that men have been, for the last 50 years, so maligned and so thrown under the bus over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where there's no limit. There is no bottom of what can be said. Like, there's no third rail. There's no, that's too far. Yet you're still sticking around and still participating and still giving it a shot is a testament to who men actually are.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know, like, it's not like
I used to be in the domestic violence high risk team. And mate, it was honestly, oh God, this is going to get me in trouble. I would imagine that was, I could have some degree with an African-American being at a KKK meeting. Because, mate, the things those people were saying, and of course, like, I couldn't defend myself, and I was there in full uniform, you know, with sometimes, like, if I just come in, like, normally you went there unarmed, but like, if I'd had to go on a job or whatever it is, like, I was turning up there and sometimes in kit. So, like, if I'm such a bad, threatening male walking in with my Glock, what, you know, and they're all, and fundamentally, they're kind of validating the fact that we are kind of decent because they're relying on my restraint.
Yeah.
When you're sitting there going all the time, you suck, you're dumb, you're bad, you suck, you're dumb, you're bad, you're a rapist, you hurt people, and I don't do anything. It's like, you're relying on my restraint. Like, if you actually thought I was a predator and you actually thought I had no restraint,
you wouldn't be up in my face screaming and spitting at me about how asshole-ish I am.
It's like, so you relying on my restraint is your strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. Like you said, fundamentally, all these things are validating the fact that we're just not that bad.
No,
just not that bad.
There's a small, like, there's absolutely a small percentage of sociopaths and psychopaths.
Of course,
a small percentage, but the way it's talked about, there's just such, like, I can't remember the word. I've lost the word, but there is just such a glaring difference between the narrative officially of what's going on and then what you see is so remarkably different.
And those ridiculous ads that are on TV going, teach them to be respectful, teach it. It's like, you know, those ads where these guys are like throwing stuff at girls and stuff like that. I don't remember seeing that in the 70s. Well, I don't remember seeing that in the 80s. Like, you know, I didn't, maybe it happened. I don't know, but you know, like the first school I went to was a nun school, a convent. I tell you,
got slapped a lot.
I'll tell you who was in who, you know, and like we learned it, you know, thank God those nuns were.
It kind of took me a long time, like, and I'm still deprogramming. It took me a long time to be like, how can nobody else see this? It's kind of a bit like the gender critical stuff a little bit at the moment as well. Like, a lot of this stuff came out of, these are feminist based ideas, and there are a lot of like gender critical people that high up in the movement, like I think even, no, Helen Joy said it and then she retracted it. They'll actually say these ideas came from us, like this oppressor oppressed stuff, like we're part of this movement. Like, I don't know if it actually came from them, but they're all those, like a lot of roads lead straight through there to get here. And they're kind of doing this whole thing where they're like, you know, like, we want to undo this inevitable consequence, but we want to keep where we started. And it's like, I don't understand what that, like, how does that work? Like,
you
need to look at all of this stuff, because there's a number of ways we got here, and that's definitely one of them. And it's gone too far now. Like, but
and it is,
holding on to that with both hands, but while screaming about that.
It raises bitterness in me, Kev.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't help it, and I'm aware of it. And like, I wish I didn't feel that bitterness, but it does, mate. It makes me really bitter.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when you're sitting there, you know, when you're sitting there and the femo-Nazis are pecking you, and you know, they're calling you all these names. You're all, it's like, you don't care about DV, you don't care about this. It's like, how many, and like I said to one lady one day who was right into me, how many years do I need to spend enforcing, upholding the law? How many DV orders do I need to take out? How many times do I need to be injured in the service of women? The last time I got seriously injured, I got my teeth knocked out. That was at a DV. How many times do I need to be hospitalized?
Put it on the line and prove it.
Until you will accept. Like, what can you tell me? If you reach this point, I will accept that you are not complete scum, like, you know, and not an oppressive piece of dirt. But it affects, like, you know, I got to talk to my girls sometimes too, because they're surrounded by this rubbish on TikTok and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
I've even had those conversations with my girls. Going, well, okay, am I imperfect? Yeah, and like, I'm their dad. I mean, have they seen me completely lose my temper and, you know, do things that I shouldn't? Yes, absolutely. Have they seen that? But I'm like, okay, so let's look at the narrative of who I am. how many times do I need to pick you up from work? How many times do I got to like give you a cuddle when you're sitting there feeling miserable and you know the other girls are big bitches to you at school? How many times are, you know, because it's not that case. Like, how much food do I need to put on the table? How much money do I need to make? You know, how big does the house need to be?
Yeah, I kind of think when you start seeing the others, like, I kind of had this sense before I started bumping into, because I bumped into Janice Fiamengo and Christina Hoff Summers and Camille Puglia months ago, and they kind of started me off on this path, and I kind of had this like sense that something wasn't quite right. Like the 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women on on campuses that was running around, that statistic in the 90s. Like I believed it, but there was like a 5 or 10% part of me that was like, are you sure? Like that's a big number. Like if you say so, like I don't have any information that contradicts you, so it must be true, but that doesn't feel right. And then I bumped into, you know, like Christina Hoff Summers and Camille Puglia, and then Janice Fiamengo and Gad Sard and Jordan Peterson, and all of these people agree about this subject, and they refer to things in passing like it's just absolute fact, like the opposite of what this like the anti-feminist stuff is just absolutely true. Like there's no question, the data is in, it's been decades now, there's no discussion to be had here, and they're going back and forth and talking about these things and statistics, like there's just no room to wiggle. And then I bumped into Bettina, and then I bumped into this men's the Red Pill movie and Karen Strawn, and when you start seeing the other side of the argument, you start realizing the bits that you missed previously. And it's like, yes, women have a tough time in society.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Of course.
But men also have a tough time in society. And that's because life is difficult and messy, and there's a lot of people living in close contact with each other in, you know, cities and towns. And that is not a natural state of affairs for us to exist, you know, peacefully together. Like there's some tension that's always going to be part of this equation.